It's a new style.
These are custom cups.
It's I have no idea. The Oluanai coffee.
Oluanai coffee. We have our own coffee now. Okay. So I don't even know what I want to ask you first. Let's talk first about, okay, here's a couple of things I don't know. Like, is a boudoir shoot something you wanted to do before you knew it was an option to shoot here?
So, yes, it's...
You're going to have to bring the mic super close here.
Okay. Yes, it's always been something that I've wanted to do, but as a Christian, I've never thought I would have an environment that would give me the opportunity to do it where I was comfortable and also felt like I wasn't promoting anything bad. And I feel like you know what you're doing and you know that line and how to portray it in a tasteful way in your images and know what your clients want. So that's why I was comfortable shooting with you, because I trusted you and I know you have a good eye for that.
That, okay, I'm glad we're talking about this because
that's kind of a deep thing, I know, to
it
jump
is,
right into.
But I do think it's such a common thing because we do get a lot of like, you're either conservative for whatever reason or you're actual Christian or in some kind of religious circle where people are worried about like, oh my gosh, like where am I going to get this done? Where people feel like guilty about it or like it's super taboo. And it's such an interesting thing because I try to create an environment where it's like, okay, like this is as up and up as you can be and still capture something that's super elegant, super sensual. And for most of our clients, it's obviously like super private because like they don't want, they're also shy and they don't want it out and about. But what are the things that I guess I guess you were saying that the fact that it's tasteful was like something that helped make you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
What else helps kind of for you?
So, I mean, I like watching the TV when I'm shooting because, I mean, I can get immediate feedback because I know what I look like and I like my images and it makes me feel beautiful, and that kind of helps me get more excited about it and more comfortable. Like, I look good. Like, I like this. And then it kind of just happens, I guess.
Seeing it on a huge ass 65-inch LCD. For anybody who's listening to this and they don't know, like we shoot tethered, which means as I'm taking photos, they come up. And that could be scary for some people if they have never seen themselves that way. And like it's always a hit and miss. Not everybody does the TV.
So I guess the reason why I'm more comfortable with it is because I guess I'm just more comfortable with shooting. I guess I've shot off and on throughout my whole entire life, even when I was younger. I'd always have family friends asking me to model for them and shoot like that. So I've always really seen myself in an image. So seeing myself on a TV while shooting isn't much of a shock for me because I'm comfortable.
You've seen your photos. So.
Yeah.
So it's not like your first photo shoot ever.
No.
Even though if it was your first boudoir, it might not have been your first photo shoot.
Yeah, and we've shot tethered in the studio, not doing boudoir. So that also helped seeing it.
Yeah.
Boudoir. It was a little shocking at first because, I mean, I'm not used to shooting boudoir. Obviously, this past couple months has been the first time I've started to shoot it. And going from like, oh, I'll probably never get that opportunity to I really enjoy this opportunity and I'm shooting and I like it and I can see how good I look, but also at the same time, that's my butt on the TV. And I'm like, yeah, it was a little shocking at first, but naturally, I mean, I don't think anyone wouldn't have that unless they're, have done it multiple times, like the first time.
Well, and I know you not a lot. Well, I mean, we're friends now. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm saying that out loud because like some of what I'm going to like mention is that I could only know as your friend and not I wouldn't know this about other clients. But like you were super shy that day, like, and you're normally not. And it was funny because you came in and now in retrospect, I know that you were like nervous.
Yeah.
I don't know how nervous you were. Like describe that because I could tell something was up, but I didn't know you well enough to know how nervous you were.
So the reason, we shot the first time is because you posted on your Celestialis.
I don't remember this.
So yeah, okay. So you posted on your story, hey, I think it was like rainy out or something.
Yes.
You're like, hey, I want to shoot Boudoir, or it was on your Boudoir account. So you had said, hey, I want to shoot. And I was like, I really want to shoot. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. So I literally came in the day of, that morning, I didn't know I was shooting Boudoir, to shooting it that afternoon. So it was kind of, that's why I didn't have the mental preparation, I guess you'd say, for shooting this. Like, it's not something, like I've thought about it, like I said earlier, like, yeah, I want to be able to do that someday. I don't know if I'll ever will. And then it went from that to be like, okay, we're shooting it in like a couple hours. And I was like, okay, I'm nervous.
Yeah. And so, okay. So again, for the sake of people, anybody watching this, so I would say maybe 2 or 3 times a year, I'll just like wake up one day, I've got nothing to do and I'll need content for Celestialis. And so I'll just shoot it out there. Like who wants, and that's not normal because I don't normally do, normally it's like a lot of preparation, but it's funny hearing the other side of that. Because for me, it's just like, like I just wake up like I'm bored, like here you go. And I'm probably having this effect on the 3 people that like sign up that day to come in. They're like, oh my gosh, like they're like freaking out because like they just agreed to jump off this cliff. And
well, it's kind of a cliff I looked over the edge of for a while, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I was nervous, but yeah, it was, you shot differently when you were shooting Boudoir.
Oh, I'm a different person when I'm shooting Boudoir.
You're not a different person.
Okay.
You are more, I mean, this is just my observation. You're like, okay, this is just an observation. I don't know if this is true or not. But you're like very careful of where your eyes are going. Like Oluanai, like obviously it's different type of shoot. I mean, we're shooting. I'm comfortable. You're comfortable. Blah, blah, blah. I could tell you're very aware and you're very respectful and concerned about how your client is feeling right now. Because because you're already putting him in a vulnerable position, right?
Metaphorically as well as literally, I guess.
Yes, both. Very vulnerable for shooting Boudoir. I mean, you're naked or barely covered or have lingerie on, or, I mean, it depends on what kind of vibe you're going for. And you were very careful about where your eyes were going.
It's a lot of eye contact for boudoir shoots. I'm like constantly just eyes.
And you weren't creepy about it though. You weren't like staring in my eyes and like trying to look at other places. Like you were just focused on what you were doing. And yeah, I felt so comfortable the whole entire time. I didn't feel like, I mean, you and I are friends too. Right. So like that also helps. But I mean, this is for people who are interested in shooting with you. Like I felt so comfortable, and like just the way you treated me in that situation was very nice.
I think it's so funny that you bring that up and that you even noticed, because I try to be really nonchalant about it. I try to make it like, oh, I'm just looking into just your eyes like I would under any normal circumstances, but that's not true. Like when I'm shooting something else, I'm scanning for problems like on wardrobe and is there a tag hanging out? So normally I'm scanning more of a body when I'm shooting, you know, like fashion or something like that. And when I'm shooting boudoir, I am very intentional where my eyes are, because I don't want somebody to think I'm just like staring at them. Yeah. And I thought I was like super cool and nonchalant about it, but maybe it's kind of obvious.
You were, but
it's noticeable.
It was noticeable in a way that was reassuring.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, I do. That's so funny. I always thought like that was like not noticeable. And so it's good to know It's funny to know what's happening on the other side.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would. I mean, I noticed it in a positive way. If anyone did notice it besides me, it would have been in a positive way.
Right.
It's not obvious. I'm not like saying you're just like
Yeah.
trying to look anywhere but.
Right. Well, and I'm not. I mean, I do get shy. Like, to be honest, and I think as much as I've done this, like, I do understand that this is a sensitive thing. Like, I don't just like wake up and go to photo shoot guns blazing. Like, this is nothing. Like, people are trusting me with a lot, and I do have to. I want to treat it appropriately.
Yeah.
But it's funny how much of the intentionality is like, you can see it on both sides. I think that's kind of fun. Yeah. So, okay. And did you know, like, because I think it's okay for me to say we did shoot some full nudes. Like, did you come in kind of like mentally prepared, like that you'd be shooting nudes? Did you like, because what did you imagine you were going to do?
Honestly, I didn't really know because of the short time span to think about it. I just went.
Right.
I was comfortable just doing it because I'm familiar with you. We're friends, you know, like I trust you.
I wasn't going to just plaster something all over the internet.
Yeah, and I know you wouldn't do that. And normally I am very cautious when I shoot with people. Like, when I don't know a photographer, it's easier to assume bad things than the good things because you are being vulnerable. You're there to have your image. And if you sign a release form, then it's even more vulnerable. So trusting is something that you have to build. And I had that enough with you where I came into the studio and was like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I love the images, and I definitely got way more, like, I got comfortable in the situation. I was kind of afraid that was going to show in my images too, because
that you were going to be nervous, or
because you don't. I mean, unless you're going for that like kind of shy look, but I mean, I didn't want it to restrict me in any way. But I didn't really know. I guess that's the short answer. I didn't really know where we were gonna go with it, but
which is kind of the opposite of the way Celestialis normally works. Normally, there's like a lot of conversations that go into like people's comfort zones, but when we do like those like spur of the moment shoots, it's like, by the way, like people just show up, and it's kind of terrifying.
You did talk to me about it though.
Oh, did I?
Because it was my first boudoir shoot. You're like, hey, because I don't know if you.
I don't remember anything.
Maybe you didn't know that I was aware you were posting on your boudoir account. Like maybe you thought, oh, she just wants to shoot. But you were like,
yes, I do remember thinking like, does Rayna know what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
You did clarify that with me. And I was like, okay. Like, and mentally I was like, yes, I know that.
That's right. I do remember now being like, oh, I wonder what she thinks we're doing. And okay, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you did go over it with me. And I knew I was comfortable doing implied. And from waist up, I knew we were going to do implied. Like, I was comfortable with that. But I didn't, anticipate the implied waist down.
Right.
But we ended up doing that, and I felt fine and comfortable, and I felt confident doing that. But...
Well, and it's hard because I think I remember telling you, and because I tell everybody this, like, as nervous as they are, like, I'm like, hey, listen, I know you're really nervous, but in 15 minutes, you're going to feel super comfortable.
And you did say that to me, and that is actually quite true.
Yeah, it happens so fast.
Very true.
It's crazy how fast it happens, because it's like 1 minute I'm this total stranger, for most people, I wasn't for you, but 1 minute I'm this outside person in this space that normally other people don't occupy, and so quickly, like, I can see everybody just boom, everybody's super comfortable, and it's pretty wild how fast people, and I think it has to do something to do with space, and I don't know.
I think it's so fun that the nervousness just melts away.
Fun.
Like, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off, and then you're like, oh my gosh, that Band-Aid wasn't a Band-Aid. It was I don't know. something else that's enjoyable, not ripping off a Band-Aid. I have no idea where I was going with that, but
that's a great illustration though. I mean, even though we don't have the second half to it, is that people think it's going to be this really painful Band-Aid and it turns out to be something really fun. And I think that's a great, I wish we could figure out the second half of that illustration, but so people come in and I think people imagine it's like a really sensual experience and it's like it's going to be like intense and it ends up just being kind of just lighthearted and fun and goofy. And I think for most people, they can't conceptualize being in that sensitive position, making something that's kind of sensual and yet it's not intense. It's not dramatic. It's not.
Yeah. I feel like on the model side of things, it is what you make it. Obviously. You're fun to shoot with. Like,
oh, that's sweet.
Well, I mean, it's really true. So it's easy for models to be more comfortable and have fun with it because you're very relaxed and you're a very fun person. Am I speaking?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So it's easy to have fun when you have a good photographer. And I'm just hyping you up because it's true. I mean, it's true.
Well, on my end, like I'm stressed the whole time. Like the whole time I'm like stressed out. Like, am I going to get something that this person likes?
I thought you only get stressed when in your situation you have never done before. Like if you're new in a location or something like that.
So it's a different kind of anxiety. I guess it's more like, it's not like if I'm shooting a friend just, where I know I don't have like deadlines and like quotas. That's the only time when I'm shooting where it's just like the shoot we did. Like I didn't really have any quotas for you. Like, and that was easy. When I have a client and it's like, they're paying
a lot of money.
They're paying a lot of money to do this. Like, and it's like, okay, I want them to have this great experience. Like, and so I just kind of imagine that I look stressed the whole time, but maybe I don't. I don't know.
I've seen you stressed once before, and it was when we were doing the projector.
Oh.
That's the only time I've seen you stressed. But so I think you hide it well.
Yeah, maybe. And you're also pretty easy to shoot, so I'm not as stressed around you. I'm like, okay, this is going to be easy to get something
It'll
good.
work out somehow.
Yeah.
Speaking of stressed, I was thinking about our photos we did in the truck.
Yeah.
And how I was like, oh my gosh, there's houses way in the distance. There's a house way, way over there. They could, if they had binoculars, see me right now. And I was like, it made no sense for me to be.
This is so great because I did, just for anybody listening, so we take a truck out to the middle of nowhere on a road.
The road's closed. So we're like at the end of the line.
But it's not like way out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but not.
Still see houses.
You still see houses. They're in the distance. I want to say they're half a mile away.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not super close.
Mm-hmm. I can see the house.
And Rayna starts, I see it in your face that you're like getting really nervous. And I'm like, hey, what are you worried? I was like, what are you worried about? And you're like, what if somebody sees us?
It's like, what if somebody has a telescope or binocular and they happen to look out here? It was irrational as all things, but like, I'm like, I mean, Boudoir is different. We can go downtown and I could do a million splits in the air.
Right.
Or go in an elevator, do a handstand and get yelled at and kicked out of an elevator.
Right.
And that's fine. Boudoir is different because of my values and because of, I guess my reputation. I don't know if my reputation's it. Because I want people to know I do have a line when I do shoot. Like I'm not shooting very sensual and I'm not wanting to expose myself to a bunch of different people. Like I think about what I post like versus what I don't share with people. And so going out in a public space, you don't have any control over that.
Right.
Unless you have a jacket and you can just like hide. So that's kind of why I was a little bit more on edge and felt like I was in more of a risky situation considering that. I mean, but what was more worrisome for me rather than the houses was since we were on the closed road, a lot of people would like come down and like turn around where we were shooting, but I was looking for cars.
So okay, I rarely get to talk to somebody about this kind of stuff because this thing about one, reputation, two, not having a negative impact on the people around us and promoting lust.
Yeah.
Being Christian, coming from a religious, I'm going to say religious background because not everybody who comes to studio is Christian and they have other, faith that similarly they don't want to promote the wrong thing. I think it's a really interesting thing. It is something that I think about a lot as a photographer, and it's cool talking to you about it because when we shoot, it's like, okay, like we both are in this interesting situation where it's like, well, it is going in a public space. We have our own personal, like what we're okay with modesty and that sort of thing. And it's such a tricky thing to balance.
Yeah. I do feel a lot of pressure right now. Right now it's just you and me sitting here, but there's however many people watch this, they're going to have their own idea of what modesty is. They're going to have their own idea of what is exceptional or acceptable for Christian conduct considering this type of photo shoot. And there's a lot of taboo behind it. Boudoir shoots.
Right.
There's an expectation for boudoir that's just, that's what that is, and it can't be anything else. So I do feel a lot of pressure because I know there's a lot of opinions on it and a lot of strong opinions. But people don't understand that there can be I don't want to say good intentions because good intentions aren't enough to justify an action. But it is seen in a different light. Like when I shoot boudoir, I'm not shooting boudoir to be like, like I want this to be super sexual and that's the only purpose of it. I shoot boudoir because I have fun and I love it and I love to see myself looking good like that. Like sorry. Like when you share it with other people, that's when you got to get careful. And that's what I am careful with. I did share that image of when we did this shoot, I'm covered with the white sheet. I shared that on my Instagram. And I did get shade thrown at me from multiple people. And I'm completely covered up. Like, I think you can see a sliver of my butt.
Yeah.
And I've posted in my swimsuit before on my Instagram and didn't get anything. Like, and I'm completely covered in that photo. And you and I did meet for coffee one time and talk about it. And it's just the idea that it was in a sensual context.
Right. Even though your pose wasn't.
Yeah. Even my pose wasn't bad. And that's another thing. Posing and what angle the photo's taken at, from what perspective the photo is taken from, decides all those things. And that can be completely different than the typical boudoir shoot, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think we deal with slightly different issues when we talk about this because we're on two different sides and our goals are very different. If I have I get a pastor's wife in here and it's like they're not going to share anything, then it's like no holds bar, right? It's whatever they want for their husband or whatever. And of course they have their own limitations of what they're comfortable doing and all that. For me, when I'm I do have a website. And so part of it is okay, I've got this website people go to and it's not modest by any stretch. And I am okay, well, I'm a photographer and I want to show off what I'm capable of. I want people to know, hey, this is an option. There's nothing wrong with this. And I think if you grew up with as a Christian and everybody's just this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And then you get married and you have a physical relationship with somebody and it's oh, now people, it's their heads spin because sexuality is villainized. And it's man, it's actually a really important, healthy part of who you are. And you can't make that jump in a ceremony. You don't go from being this single person who's sexually repressed to in at a ceremony to suddenly being a healthy, like you have to have a realistic, healthy concept of sexuality. And it's unfortunately so many people carry those taboos,
like demonizing it. And
geez, and I get it. Like there are limitations that if you are religious, if you are a Christian, if you are conservative, there are boundaries that are too far, and we're going to differ. Some people can't wear bikinis at a swimming pool because that's beyond what they're capable of.
Well, you mentioned it a while ago when we were talking about this. Modesty is very different to different people. I mean, you talked about when the missionaries went over and like there was this culture that none of the females just didn't wear shirts, and they were trying to make them wear clothing. And to them, that was completely modest. It was normal. It was fine. And so, I mean, not saying that we should conform to what society tells us is what. It's all about what an individual is comfortable with. And where I draw the line is if my image is promoting lust, and that could look different to me than it does to other people. Some people could look at that image I posted and be like, that's lustful. And I don't see that as lustful. So, I mean, that's something that I'm still trying to figure out. Like, what I know I'm held to a standard, and I want to hold myself to a standard as a Christian. But how does that look like, and what should it look like? And I've made mistakes, and I mean, I will continue to make mistakes in the future, but I'm still learning about where that line is drawn. And unfortunately, people do judge when you do make a mistake.
It's cool. I think it's cool because, and you know, as a model, you know this too, that there's a lot of photographers that shoot boudoir that are believers. And in fact, even as near as Bozeman, there's a pastor's wife who's a boudoir photographer. And obviously you can tell that she's, how she runs her business is reflects that. It's one of those things where I feel really bad because I will have clients come and they're trying to get something for their husband or groom. They're about to get married, and you can see them just trying to overcome all this taboo, all this negative stuff, and they're like, this is something that they've always wanted to do. They think it's going to be really fun. It's really healthy. It's very uplifting. It really shakes off a lot of the really unhealthy connotations that they put on sexuality, and they walk out feeling like $1 million. And that's one thing. It's like, man, I wish I had understood this some other way, because they're carrying around all this garbage for so long, and it seems kind of oppressive. Like when you see like how they're struggling with it, it's like, dude, these are photos just for you and your husband. Like, why is this a bad thing to you? Yeah. And it's like they're just carrying all this weight from having it demonized in their lives. It's so, I don't know, you feel bad about it.
No, I definitely feel that even today. I have people in my life who can only see boudoir photography in one light. And if they happen to see or hear something that may persuade them, they're so set in their way that they just won't be willing to see it in the light, so seeing it for what it is and not adding assumptions. And it's really hard as just humans in general to do that with anything. But with boudoir, there's so many assumptions that come along with it that aren't true or accurate. But at the end of the day, it is boudoir. You can take it as far as you want.
Yeah.
So the fact that, people don't understand that there's like this side of the scale to it.
Yeah.
Isn't understood. They only see like the 100, not the 0.
And I think it's so funny because this is not just a conversation that religious people have.
Yeah.
Like this is like literally every model who they're thinking about the impact that their images have. They're thinking about where their boundaries are. And I think for us, it's a little more intense because we have the added thing of we do appreciate the sensitive nature. We do appreciate that this is something we really want to avoid having a negative impact, and not take, our liberties and misuse them. And I don't think people realize how much we think about it and how much we're open to have a discussion with people that aren't like just abusive and negative about it.
Yeah, I actually was trying to join I talked to you about this also. A Christian Bible study, and I went to meet with a lady, and I mentioned that I did photography, and one of the ladies saw the image I'd posted like that day or something of the white sheet image on my Instagram, and she like said it under her breath, like, oh yeah, she does other photography too, like said it just to herself, but it was enough where I could hear her, and I was like, now I know I shouldn't let that deter me from going out and being a part of a group of Christians, but it did. Like, I felt like I could not show my face to other people, other believers, if they knew I shot Boudoir, because they would think that I was lesser or not good enough, which is such a bad mindset. But I'm not going to lie. Like, I felt that way. Like, I felt like, oh, I shot Boudoir, I'm like not good enough to be a part of this group. But I mean, we're talking a lot about the Christianity side of this thing, and I know that's not necessarily what we want to talk about because it is kind of specific. I mean,
well, and I think it's okay, because anybody who I think so many people, whether or not they're Christian, they're thinking about the same thing. It just so happens that you and I are both Christian. But I've had these conversations with people who just grew up conservative or just really bought into the taboo nature or the tabooness of this, and it's pretty similar conversation. And then
the shamefulness is a lot of what I was afraid of when I shot. Like, I was afraid to tell people that I shot Boudoir because I know the assumptions that they're gonna go through their head. Like, I am not who I think they were or they thought I was, and to feel that shame is not what is the intention of this, because it's supposed to make you feel beautiful, and it does. And it sucks if you have all this taboo and all these assumptions behind what boudoir photography is, and then you go and you're like, oh my gosh, I had such a fun time and I love those images and I'm not going to share them with anyone, or blah blah blah. But now I still feel this shame because I'm not supposed to enjoy this.
Right. Well, I think part of it too is age of who you're talking to, because I've had moms in here who come in for Oluanai. They'll bring, their high school seniors for senior photos or whatever, and my Celestiala stuff is on the table, and they'll pick it up, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what how mom's gonna react to that. And it's funny because usually I'm like, like, how's this gonna go? And I'm such a pessimist, and I'm like preparing myself for like this argument, or like, oh, you do this, and it's usually the opposite. They're like, they look at the photos like, oh my gosh, David, like, I have to tell you, I did this photo shoot. And they're like, and I did this. And it's so funny because I do think it's different when it's somebody younger and they're just like, because if you're in your 20s, and I do have brides in here who come in at 19 who are getting married and want to do, and when you're on the younger side of things, it's like you're still in that transition period where you go from like demonizing sexuality to being a wife and having a healthy one. It's such a quick thing. Once you're like 30 years old, you have a different perspective, and you start talking to moms and all that, who they're like, here's what they'll say: I wish I had done that when I was your age, when I was younger. And that's the number one response when you talk to somebody that's in their 30s or 40s. We've had boudoir clients in their 50s, and they always say the same thing: I wish I'd done this. And then they don't, because of all this BS that they hear, from, really judgmental people around them. And then looking back, they're like, I wish I had done this. It's so disappointing.
Yeah. I don't know what much I could add to that besides well, we already talked about the assumptions that go around it, and like how much taboo is around it at our age.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad, like, I know we kind of went long in that, but I'm really glad we talked about it, because that is something that we think about a lot, and it feels good just getting off my chest and having a conversation with somebody. And so people can hear like what's going through my mind when I shoot this stuff, because I do have people ask questions. Now I've got a video that I can say, hey, listen to this conversation. This is what goes through my mind about this.
Well, yeah. I was afraid when I posted that first image that people were gonna be like, oh, well, she's not a Christian anymore. Like, right. Oh, well, she does naughty photos now. Like, I want to I kind of want to make a video on it saying, guys, there's more to me than those photos. I still have a very personal relationship with Jesus, and I do pray to him every day, and I have a very active prayer journal, and people who think I just tossed that out all the window are wrong. And right. I'm making assumptions about other people now, sure. But I'm assuming they think that I don't even care. But I do have a line at what images I post and what images I share and what I shoot. And yeah, I want people to know that.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if I want to steal the last word from you, but maybe I will. And we're both, this is something that it's not like it's set in stone. This is where the line is, and this is how it is. It's something that we reassess regularly. Yeah. And we are constantly analyzing, what is it that I'm doing? And in fact, just recently we did a photo shoot where you called me and you're like, well, let's talk about this. Mm-hmm. Let's figure this, because what impact. And it was so funny because we did get to, process through that. Like, hey, this is a unique photo shoot that I was doing for commercial advertising, where it was a little sexier side. And we're like, okay, even though it's one of the most modest photo shoots I've ever done, we did kind of think like, what's the purpose of this? How is it going to impact people around us? And I'm so glad that we had a conversation about it, because it's really shaping the way, that project turned out. So I think it's fun. Okay. So having talked about like that
was the deep part,
the deep part,
we just dove in.
That was really cathartic and therapeutic for me. So I'm glad we talked about it.
I feel like I don't have a lot of wisdom to share on that, because I'm still learning. So I don't know what I added to it.
I think you probably expressed a lot of thoughts that somebody in your situation is going through. So I'd be curious to hear, to see if people are commenting on this, and
they'll be like, they're such bad Christians.
We're going to find out the hard way, I guess.
There will be. There will be.
But you walk out and you feel like $1,000,000 when you're done. Describe the positive side of that when you come out of this.
I am on clouds, and the angels are singing, and I am strutting down the walkway to my car. I'm just kidding. No, it feels great. Yeah. It's awesome. I love it. And I'm like trying to think back to after I shot that. Yeah, I felt so confident. I was like, finally, I was brave enough to do this, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. Everything went great. I was comfortable. I had a blast, and I just never thought I would feel that comfortable in my own skin with a camera on me, and I did. And
so is it is the confidence booster that as we're shooting, you see that you look good and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm looking good on, like, because maybe you kind of, I guess I'm wondering if it's like, do you walk around thinking like, oh, like I don't look that good, and then when you see the proof of it, does it change your mind, or is that the confidence boost, or is it the experience? Is it like, oh my gosh, like I look like I could belong in a magazine in these photos? Like, what's the transition before and after that you're like, this makes me feel confident?
All of it, all of what you just said. Yeah, but you don't really look at yourself. You can look at yourself in a mirror and be like, okay, fix my hair. But when you see yourself in an image looking great and And you don't see yourself like that ever.
Right.
I mean,
not even coming out of the shower and like they're mirroring.
No, you won't.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's so different because you are in an image that looks like it could be in a magazine. Like you do so well with your photography. You just see this well thought out, well put together image. It's just visually put together and it just makes you feel like you could be in a magazine. Well,
and it's because on my end, I'll have a client come and sit down and this is something they want to do. And I'm like, this girl's beautiful. Like, this is going to be so easy. Like, they're drop dead gorgeous. You just assume that they just all like walk around realizing how beautiful they are. And I'm like, what do I have to, I just click a button and it comes on TV and they're like, oh my gosh. And you just see them react. I'm like, dude, don't you see this every day? And the answer is no. I don't, it's hard to believe.
No. It's so weird. It's like, I look like that.
And I get that so often. And I remember one of the very first shoots I did a long time ago, just a gorgeous model. And she's shot with a bunch of photographers before. So I was like, for sure, like she knows what she looks like. And to be fair, I was a little more experienced in the photographer she'd worked with in the past. So I did bring something to the table as far as like skill and all that photography wise. But I remember she was really beautiful and like looks at the screen. She's like, that's me. And there was no editing. It was just, she just saw them as I was taking them. And you just see it click in their brain. It's like, I can't believe I look at it. I'm like, what have you been looking at your whole life? Like that, like I just pointed a mirror at you. It's like, I feel like that's what it's like. I just point a mirror at somebody like, oh my God, who's that? And it's like, what did I do?
It's magical.
It is.
It's magical.
And I think it's just like, you know, the setting, like we create this really cool set and,
it's professional. And I mean, you can go shoot with a photographer and they're just going to, I don't know, make something up as they go along. But I mean, you have a nice studio and you've shot so much, you know how to make it look good. You can tell you're not half-assing the shoot.
Right.
So that does a lot for it.
Well, and I forget that. I mean, it's when I do have somebody, usually I'm pretty good at seeing what makes them beautiful. And I think that's the thing that I do bring to the table is I see what makes somebody beautiful, what stands out about them, what they like about themselves. And I'm like, okay, so let's put all those things that somebody likes about themselves into one single photo. And then on top of it, I add a cool set, editing, lighting, and all that. And it just exponentially, it's that person without any Photoshop, any of that stuff. But it's like you added all these things. At the end of the day, it's like, oh my gosh, with the right photographer, I totally could be on the cover of a magazine. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, it's just you, but with the same kind of thought and effort, it would be
definitely not just a selfie. That's for sure.
That's good. I mean, I guess it depends on how good you are. Any tips for somebody like getting ready and preparing for this?
Kind of thinking about that. There's different types of preparation. Mental preparation, appearance, physical appearance, prepping. What other ways? Oh, wardrobe. Things like that. I always overshoot with the wardrobe. Remember we shot a glam shoot and all the other models like had one dress and like a little bag, and I literally came in with a suitcase and 5 dresses, and I was like, should I be embarrassed?
That's normal for here. Suitcases are normal.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I always bring a lot of options. So for a boudoir shoot, it's definitely, I mean, it depends on what look you're going for. I know I always communicate with the photographer on what they are comfortable shooting and what kind of their vision is. But I brought a lot of options. That black jacket I thought was interesting, and I've never worn that in real life, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I can't really imagine you wearing that.
Yeah. but I brought it for fun. So mentally preparing is just knowing that you're going to feel a different way after you start shooting.
That you're actually going to feel good about it, and you're not going to be nervous. And it's so hard to tell somebody. Yeah. And they're just like, nope, never in a million years. Yeah. And then it's like you're there, and it's like, oh, this was way easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just like trusting that it will be fun. Like, yeah, it is crazy how much it changes.
So that's tip number 1 is just get ready. Like, don't think I'm going to be nervous. Don't think you're going to have all these reservations. You have to kind of, even though you have all those reservations and fears, that, hey, like, just trust. I'm going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to be super comfortable, and it's not going to be scary at all.
Yeah. And
even if you're scary beforehand.
Mm-hmm. And knowing, like, the safety part about it is, I know with you, if you see an image you don't like if your nipple comes out and you don't want it to, you will literally go in your camera and delete it right there.
Yeah, if somebody's nervous about that, we'll delete them. Now, if somebody's like, well, I don't want those for me, but they're not uptight, I guess I try and feel people out, because some people are more like, ooh, and other people are like, well, I won't pick that one.
So like knowing that you're going to have fun, but also that if you make a mistake, you can fix it.
Yeah. And sometimes I take a photo and somebody's like, oh my gosh, that's a really horrific photo. I don't want that to exist. And I'm like, okay, I need to delete that right now. Saves room on my hard drive.
Trying to think about tip number 2. Posing, maybe?
Oh.
I don't know. We could talk about posing, I guess.
Well, usually I pose everybody.
Yeah. That's what I'm like trying to think.
Because usually these poses are things like nobody's ever done.
Yeah. It's more of a comfort thing.
Yeah. And, and maybe like I can tell you how I think, because being on the flip side, I try to judge people like, I know people are coming with a ton of reservations. Like they come hitting the brakes. And I try to judge like, okay, I know they're going to be comfortable in 15, 20 minutes. But I don't know, and people are so hesitant to tell me what they really want, or I don't think they even know what they really want, what they want to look like. And so usually my clients want really sexy photos for themselves. And it's like, okay, well, and I'm such a shy person that I'm like, I don't want to suggest something. And then they'd be like, oh God, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah. You even told me, you're like, okay, so what's your boundaries so I don't act or like sound stupid if I ask you to do something that you're not comfortable with. So we set those boundaries earlier, and I mean, you have when you shot with me anyways, I could tell you had a good way of like understanding the comfort level.
Yeah. When I try and judge, especially if if somebody's in here and they're 30 years old, it's such a different ballgame, because all those, like, they're not dealing with the whole taboo thing. They're not dealing with like any of that stuff. Like the only people that are worried about the stuff you and I talked about are the younger people, like, so it's like one of those things where I'm trying to manage, like, hey, I don't want these people to be ashamed of what they did if they have like all these like concerns. So I don't know. I'd be embarrassed if I'm like, hey, try this pose, and they're like, oh God, that's so trashy or something. I'm like, oops.
I guess that's tip number 2. Like, establish your boundaries and speak with them to your photographer so they know what your comfort level is. Tip number 2, right there.
That's a great idea. And what I would say is, like your first tip, taking your first into consideration, is you really have to decide what your boundaries are, assuming that you're going to be super comfortable. Like if you're making all those decisions based on the assumption that you're going to be nervous and regret everything, then you're going to choose the wrong concepts. But if you're like, hey, I might be nervous now, but I'm going to be nervous while I'm going to be perfectly fine and really like comfortable, what would you choose? That could be a thing to think about.
And this could be kind of seen in a bad light. I don't think it should be, but your boundaries change when you're shooting. Like you said, you're going to be more comfortable. So, I mean, it does take thought before you go into a shoot. What you don't want to just feel good and then shoot something and later be like, well, that's probably wasn't smart. So you should recognize your boundaries that you make when you're kind of not having fun and like, you know, thinking about it very deeply. But also you have to have fun when you're in the shoot. And if you think about it and you're like, okay, well, I do feel comfortable with this and I am having a crap load of fun and I'm going to keep shooting. I mean, it's very personalized, I think, and it's very complex because everybody thinks differently.
One of the best anecdotes I have is from it was like this really conservative religious girl who was getting married. She was on the younger side. I want to say she was like 23 or 24. And she came in and she was doing this for herself, half and half for her soon to be husband. And she was like, just, like, I'm going to be really conservative. Like, I don't, all this stuff. And I was like, great. Like, thank you for telling me ahead of time. And so she starts like thumbing through my portfolio and she's like, well, I might do, this looks really great. She's like, maybe I'll do this. And I was like, sure. I was like, whatever you want. And she thumbs through and she's like, I think I want to try this, but I'm not sure. I'm like, it's up to you. And she was really nervous. And then so we started shooting, and as soon as the images came up on the screen, and she was like, oh, like it just clicked in her brain, and she's like literally hair down, like did this, and she's like, let's do, like, it just made sense to her. And some of the best photos we've ever taken. She ended up posting some of them online and everything because she was so proud.
The images that you take aren't what you traditionally, it depends. I mean, you could go there, but when you set your boundaries up and you end up getting those good photos, like I thought I was hesitant to do implied at first because implied could look really trashy.
Right.
But it can also look so beautiful.
Right.
And I wanted those so beautiful photos that weren't trashy and weren't super on the sexy side. And you can do that, and people just don't think about it at first.
Yeah. Well, Rayna, I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. I know we went a little longer than either one of us planned on, but I appreciate you as always.
Yeah.
And
thank you for interviewing me. I love talking with you.
This is a blast.